first group of SANDF soldiers to arrive back home from the DRC has now completed their demobilization program. The troops will be reintegrated back into their units and thereafter they'll be reunited with their families. Their return follows a ceasefire agreement reached between the M23 rebels and the DRC military. The third group of about 248 troops landed at Bram Fischer International Airport in Bloemfontein yesterday. Those members will also undergo the demobilization program at Tempe Military Base. A fourth group will arrive today with the phased withdrawal set to be completed by the 25th of this month.
The first day is a psychosocial program where they are going to be interviewed by the chaplains as well as the social workers and other staff from the medical environment. The second day of the demo process, it is mainly we do a personnel, and then we also do some intelligence debriefing. And then thereafter, on the third day, they are going to be leaving. So it's a very short program, but with a very, very detailed in terms of the outcome of them. And
the weapons and equipment are coming back. It does not imply that they are carrying those weapons as of now. So there is a process currently underway of equipment being transported from Tanzania, where currently almost 80% have been moved from Goma up to the transit camp in Tanzania. As we indicated previously, that both our equipment is quite big.
All right, let's speak more about this process with military sociologist at Stellenbosch University. That's Professor Lindy Heinecken, who joins us now via our video link. Great to have you on the program, Prof. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. You know, I'm reminded as we take in the details of this withdrawal of when U.S. troops were pulling out of Afghanistan, and there was so much said about the way in which that happened, the pace, and whether or not, in fact, it was good for the Afghanistan people. With that in mind, I wonder if you can take us through your own thought process about how SADC is pulling out of the DRC, given the context that still prevails there.
It's a very challenging situation because if you look at the mandate of these missions, most in the SAMI-DRC deployment, it was, of course, more of a counterinsurgency where they were supporting the SADC armed forces. But one of the big tasks of these missions, in fact, 90% of peacekeeping missions have got a protection of civilian mandate. And it is often these innocent civilians caught up in this war that are suffering the most and are affected by the withdrawal of peacekeepers. We do know from research that when there is the presence of peacekeepers in areas of operations, that they do make a difference in terms of the specific mandate.
Right. And, you know, it was interesting to listen to the SANDF chief, Rodzani Mapoenya, speaking to the troops once they had arrived back home. This is the first, I think, two groups at the time. And he spoke about lifting the veil for the SANDF and allowing people to really see what's taking place there. It's difficult to kind of gauge what he was alluding to, given the fact that I think so much of what's being claimed has been taking place in the SANDF is contested information. But do you also get the sense that, in fact, the general public isn't really aware of the conditions under which South African soldiers are working in missions like these?
Absolutely, and I do hope that the SANDF will lift the veil, because up until now, the Defence Force has been very insular and kind of secretive, and that affects public trust. So the more secretive you are, the less people start to trust the Defence Force, the less they have faith in the organisation. And I think this is really an opportunity for the SANDF to lift the veil and to expose exactly the difficulty, the military and operational challenges that they faced in terms of their manpower, in terms of their equipment, in terms of interoperability and working, and the logistical challenges, the financial challenges, and also the political factors which have really bedeviled this deployment.
Yeah.
And affected cohesion, yes.
And what do you mean by that? Are you able to speak more about the political aspects of their challenges?
Yes, most certainly, specifically not so much with MONUSCO, where we also have troops deployed, but with SAMI-DRC, few of the member states were willing to fully fund the mission, and because it didn't align with their national interests. And there was also a lack of cohesion within the SADC states themselves, even competition amongst regional players, such as the as we saw in the AU mandated Luanda process. Then there was strategic ambiguities as well, in terms of a very clear strategy in terms of how to deal with the M23 rebels. We had also got the tensions with Rwanda and the opposition, and support that he was actually giving the M23 rebels. So, and also then within the SADC region, as the situation became more hostile, excuse my voice, I'm a bit fluish, we saw waning support, and then of course withdrawal when the things really got hot. And many challenges in terms of working with the SADC as well, in terms of their own professionalism, their motivation, morale, training, made it extremely difficult for the South African soldiers.
Yeah, fair enough. Don't worry, Prof. I can still hear you loud and clear through that flu. So thanks for indulging us, notwithstanding your own challenges. The sense I also got when the SANDF chief was speaking to some of the troops is that he understood that there was a bit of a morale issue at the very least, and had invited the troops to come forward and have a frank conversation, he says, which leads me to my next question, and it might be a bit elementary, but I think it's still worth addressing. What happens now to some of these troops that are back? I understand there's some kind of debriefing that unfolds, but what follows after that?
Yes, I think you did at the beginning of this broadcast, you did get an overview. I mean, it rests on various legs. The first, of course, is there would be some kind of comprehensive health screening of the troops coming back. Then there would be, of course, psychological support. The Defence Force has got quite an extensive what they call resilience training program, where soldiers are prepared before the mission and when they come back. The biggest challenge lies with integration, reintegration back into their home unit and back into the family. And this is an intense physical and mental process. And one of the biggest challenges based on my research, and I wrote an article called No Place Like Home about our South African soldiers coming back from deployment, is in terms of family relations. So while our soldiers are adequately prepared to reintegrate back into the unit and back into the family, the actual family members don't always fully understand the difficulties, trauma that the soldier, husband, wife has gone through while on their deployment. And many factors affect it. There's external factors as well as internal factors, so it depends on the family relations. But this is really one of the most difficult phases as well for the soldiers coming back, is this reintegration. Because even if they have not seen conflict, which is unlike our soldiers, there is an element of post-traumatic stress in terms of what they've experienced on this specific deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I shudder at the thought of how that might manifest in something like a home setting, right? I mean, we live in a country where there's already so much violence in the home. So hopefully that process, is effective at the very least. And as we round off our discussion, Prof, what lessons do you reckon the SANDF perhaps in the main is taking from this process? I mean, I know there was a lot of criticism around just how much of the burden South Africa is shouldering, for example, as part of these peacekeeping missions in the DRC.
Yes, well, it's very interesting in some of my research that I've been doing is that there hasn't been a very good capturing of lessons learned. And I think in this specific deployment, as well as the deployment in the Central African Republic, where those lessons were captured, that this is a very important point in the history of the Defence Force to reflect and to be really open and debate the kind of challenges that they faced, and not just to record the lessons learned, but to learn from these lessons going forward.
Absolutely. Professor Lindy Heinecken, thanks very much indeed for helping us think through
Great pleasure.
these very important issues. Really do appreciate the insight and the time.